Hey guys, welcome back. So this is episode 2. My name is Duvi. I'm an energy and business nerd, and I really want to help demystify some of the concepts of the grid, of electricity, of energy, and how it all comes together to basically serve us as end users of the electricity grid, as businesses, as homes, etc. So to start things off, I'm just going to give us a quick overview of how the electricity grid is structured, right? So there's 3 fundamental components. So at the first point, you've got your generator, or generation. The second, you've got transmission. And the third, you've got distribution, okay? So keep those 3 segments in mind as we go through this discussion, okay? So at a very high level, generation, as the name suggests, is where electricity is generated. This could be from coal power stations, it could be from nuclear, solar, wind. All sorts of different technologies are available to do this. And as some people would say, it's just usually very clever ways to spin a generator. Sometimes it's clever ways to heat water that spins a generator, but we'll get there. Secondly, you've got your transmission network. So transmission is essentially moving electricity over long distances from where it's generated to where it's getting used. A good example here would be a coal power station sitting in Mpumalanga that is feeding Johannesburg. Right? Johannesburg obviously demands a lot of power, but Johannesburg doesn't have as big a big power station like Mpumalanga does, for example. So we need to find a way to move that electricity from there. Yeah. And then lastly, you've got your distribution. So different markets work a little bit differently. In the South African context, your distribution will typically be your municipalities. So they'll purchase a bunch of electricity from Eskom or from the grid. We're now working in a grid that where Eskom has been broken up into these 3 components, or these 3 layers of the grid, basically. And then they'll sell this electricity to homes and businesses alike. And I say all of this with a little caveat that there are customers that purchase electricity directly from Eskom, but for the purposes of the discussion, let's exclude them for a second. Okay. Lovely. So let's talk about generation. So the first layer of all of this is where electricity is actually, I was about to say created, but the laws of thermodynamics were about to be thrown in my face. I could just feel it. But basically, where electricity is generated. So I've mentioned things like your coal plants, your solar farms, etc. So there's basically a few different types of generators that you can have on the grid. So the first one that you could have is, your base load. So this is power that's just reliably on all the time. And, you can't really turn it on and off very quickly and respond to grid conditions, which we'll talk about in the next section when we get into transmission. But essentially, these are the types of power stations or the type of generators that are going to take a long time to turn on and turn off. So just imagine how long it might take to turn on a nuclear plant, for example. You can't just flip a switch. You need to ramp it up over a few days or a few weeks. And similar with some of these big coal power stations as well. So that's your base load. Then next to that, what you have is your, you could call it peaking load, or peaking power plants. So peaking power plants are usually things like your gas-fired power stations. So these ones, you can basically turn them on and off in a matter of minutes to hours. And basically, they're typically a lot dirtier and more expensive, but they are necessary to keep the system stable. So you could just imagine, which we'll talk about supply and demand when we get into transmission. But you can imagine if all of a sudden a lot of electricity is being demanded on the grid, you're going to need a way to quickly supply that to the grid. Okay. And lastly, you would have your intermittent power sources, typically your renewables. So Your intermittent power sources, as the name suggests, will only be available at certain points in time. So imagine with solar. Solar is a very good example. Solar is only going to generate when there is sun, when the sun is out, excuse me. You will not generate solar power in the evening. I don't care how hard you try. So, so basically, it's very dependent on weather conditions, on time of the year. You're not going to generate wind power, for example, if there's no wind. It's just not going to generate any at all. And there's a very fascinating thing that happens when you start generating more power than is being asked for on the grid. But we'll get there. Amazing. And another caveat as well is with the peaking stations, you could technically also use batteries to help serve that purpose because they can turn on and off or they can feed energy into the grid very quickly. So it's just one that I forgot to add there. Brilliant stuff. So moving on from generation, there is transmission. So once your electricity is generated, you need a way to move it from one point to another. And I used the example already of a coal power station that's sitting in Mpumalanga that's feeding energy to Johannesburg, which obviously is going to demand a lot of power. And it just happens that Johannesburg doesn't have its own big power station, let's say. So what the system operator basically needs to do there is once the electricity is generated, they need to figure out a way to move it from there to here. But the big problem is that if they didn't, do any sort of creative electrical engineering in between, you'd lose so much of that electrical energy to heat, right? So just imagine when you charge your phone and you decide that you're going to use your phone while you charge it. If you fill the cable afterwards, it's usually a little bit warm, right? And that's an example of electrical energy turning into heat. And this will happen if you basically use low voltage, high current electricity, or try and transport low voltage, high current electricity, which, this is not an electrical engineering channel. I'll see if I can link some good videos that describe this in the comments down below. But yeah, basically what the transmission network will do, the system operator, they're going to then increase the voltage and reduce the current, right? So just keep that in mind. So voltage will be increased using a transformer just after the point where electricity was generated. And then from there, the current will also be reduced. So again, there's some really good videos on YouTube that describe this, and I'm probably going to butcher it if I try. But I kind of get the basics. So once the voltage is increased to a very high level, to high voltage, it will be transmitted over long distances. So let's say Mpumalanga to Johannesburg, and I keep using that example for simplicity. By the time it gets to Johannesburg, what will happen is it'll get to a distributor who we'll describe shortly. And they will take that high voltage electricity and reduce it down to, say, medium voltage. And then from that medium volt, obviously, then the current will also increase. And that's the point when they can start distributing. But let's not jump the gun quite yet. A very key thing that the system operator needs to do at this stage, in the transmission stage, is to match supply with demand. So supply and demand of electricity is so critical to maintaining grid stability, which is something you've probably heard multiple times. You've seen that ad at the bottom of the screen in the evening from Eskom saying, please turn off your appliances, the grid is under constraint, etc., etc. So essentially, at this stage, I'm going to bring it back to a more easily digestible way of thinking about it. Imagine you're at home, right? You've got a family, you've got kids. And what's happening throughout the course of the day is you're demanding different amounts of electricity at different points in time. In the morning, you wake up, you have a shower, you make a cup of coffee, you'll make breakfast. You can see that you're demanding a lot of electricity at that point. And then everyone goes to work, to school, the house is empty, and there's really nothing that's drawing electricity unless maybe you have a smart washing machine that you've told to turn on in the middle of the day for some reason, right? Which is fine. And then you come back from work or from school and you start, making a snack. You turn on the toaster to have a snack after school. Perhaps you want to have another shower after you come back from the gym. You're going to start cooking dinner. Later on when the food is ready, someone has left their food out for too long and it's not cold, so you need to turn on the microwave. So you can see that all of a sudden you're demanding a lot of electricity again. And obviously as the evening progresses, people start getting ready for bed, and then there's no power being demanded other than just some outside lights for security, maybe a night light for those that are scared of the dark. But generally not a lot. So you can see that the pattern of your electricity demand kind of follows almost like an M shape throughout the day, right? Bear that in mind. And this is just with one house. Now imagine this is happening across millions of homes across a country, a municipality, a country. And the system operator basically needs to then make sure that the amount of electricity that's being generated can supply that, or the amount of electricity that's been supplied can meet that demand. Right, so I'm going to see if I can put up some cool graphics that help describe this a little bit better. But yeah, so from there, transmission, we've moved from high voltage to medium voltage to the distributor. Okay, so at the distributor level, or the distribution level, they'll, like I said, take that high voltage and step it down, as the terminology goes, to medium voltage usually. Before stepping it down again into low voltage that can be distributed into homes, right? So basically, again, they're going to use a transformer. I'm going to link a video in the description that talks about transformers. It's black magic as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, so the distributor or the distribution point is literally just taking all of that electricity from different generators. So in this case, I've just used the coal-fired power station as the example, but there could be a mixture. It could be coal station, it could then with a nuclear station, with some solar here, some batteries there, some wind there. All of them are connected onto the grid at any given point in time, with the system operator basically making sure that the amount of electricity being demanded equals the supply. So the distributor is literally just taking that electricity and distributing it to homes and businesses at the end of the day. And that's where you're going to see those substations, the ones that are always tripping when there's load reduction, isn't it? Yeah. And we'll talk about the concepts of load shedding and load reduction in a different video. I think it deserves its own spotlight here. And excuse me for a second, I need to check my notes that I'm not forgetting anyone. But yeah, so distribution, like I said, this is electricity being moved into homes. It could be overhead cables, into substations. Could be underground cables, a bunch of different ways that basically can be used. But yeah, so coming back to it and just giving us a quick recap. So we've got generation, we've got transmission, and we've got distribution. Generation, where electricity is generated, and there's a bunch of cool technologies that do that. Transmission, this is where electricity is transported over long distances efficiently and quickly, and obviously matching supply and demand. And then lastly, you've got distribution, which delivers the energy safely into homes and businesses. So this is a very complex combination of systems that, frankly, I probably haven't done justice in the way that I've described it. There's so much that goes into each layer, which we can unpack in a different video. But essentially, with things like smart grids, which is where we're going right now, and you can have a look at examples like Australia and the UK and some parts of the US as very good examples of what a smart grid would look like. But essentially, all of this comes together to ensure that there is enough electricity being supplied on the grid to match demand, right? And smart grids will usually have, just to add a little bit of a Spanish to the work, a decentralized generation network. So you'll have homes that have solar systems installed that can sell energy back to the grid, for example. But we'll get into those details in another video. I think we're going to leave it here for now. And yeah, that's the journey of how electricity goes from your power plant or a power plant to your plug. And I hope this discussion has helped you understand it a little bit better. please let me know if I've butchered any of the ideas or the concepts. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some power engineers here that are like, this guy's talking absolute nonsense. But yeah, this is attempt at video number 2, and in video number 3, we can start diving into the details of some of these technologies a little bit more, and we can also talk about things like, why load shedding, why load reduction, and all of those cool things. So yeah, you know the drill. Like, subscribe for more of this type of content, and yeah, drop some comments down below. Let's get a chatter going. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'll see if I can answer them, or if I need to ask some other people. Anyway, guys, that's all. Cheers.